Hi, this is Jack Stanley, and I wanted to talk about the matrix system on Victor records for beginning collectors, to explain basically how it worked, because there's an awful lot of confusion in the earliest Victor records. One has to understand that the Victor Company was founded in 1901, incorporated at least, October 3rd, 1901. But of course, the first records made by what would become Victor were called the Consolidated records, and this all came from the ashes of the Berliner gramophone. The Victor record would eventually come from Berliner to a degree. Now the thing is, for beginning collectors, as you start to collect, you will find later, standard red seal, standard black seal. But when you start getting into the early records, you start finding some very unique anomalies. Now let's start from the very beginning. I want to give you a little bit of a quick history on how this all worked. Now this is the first label put out. This was called the Consolidated Label. And if you'll notice on the bottom of this, you will see the number on the record is the same as the number on the label, which says it is 174, A174. Now, when they first started making records under the Consolidated Label, which was to kind of disguise where it was coming from initially when all the lawsuits were going on between Columbia and Zonophone and Berliner, these were produced by the Consolidated Talking Machine of Philadelphia, which was Eldridge Johnson, okay, for all intents and purposes. You're not going to see these very often. They're quite rare. But if you do find one, grab it. I recommend that. If you do find early 7 inches, which are called pre-dogs, good chance they're going to look like this. This is what you usually do find. I'm trying to do this as best I can. Now, on the top of this, you will see the matrix number on the wax, which will be the same that's on the label, which is A94, and it's The Holy City by Harry MacDonagh, which he made countless copies of because it was an extremely popular recording. So, we've established the fact that A would become the matrix letter for 7-inch records. Now in 1901, the Victor Company went to 10-inch records. So A could not be used, so they went to the next logical letter, B. B became the matrix letter for the 10-inch record. Now, the early 10 inches, give you some examples. This is a nice example of a 10-inch, and of course the number on the wax is the matrix number, and it's the same that's on the record for the catalog number. That all worked kind of well initially. Of course, things got confusing at times, like this one. If you look at the catalog number, it's 1180A, and then they put a big A underneath it because it was part of a 3-record set, A, B, and C, which got confusing for some of the people working there. Now just take a look at some of these numbers. They just don't make any sense. Here's some other, I just grabbed a handful just to give you an idea. This is number 102. This is number 3419. Not to be outdone, this is number, well, initially it was 3509, and it went to 55. These are all what we call pre-matrix, okay? So all of these 10-inch records, although most of them did not have a B marked onto the wax themselves, they were, as I said, the 10-inch system. And that worked pretty well, but the numbers went everywhere. There's number 7, there's number 11, there's number 3,000, number 2,000. And it was really kind of difficult because when you were issuing records, you had to make sure you didn't issue records what had been issued already. They didn't start like 1 and work their way up. It would have made a lot more sense that way, but they couldn't because you had the 7-inch. And the reason why a couple of these 10 inches are like numbers 108 is that they're giving the 7-inch number to the 10-inch. Which you really want to start getting confused, that does it, okay? So that was all well and good in the beginning of the Victor Company. And these are things that you will find and see. Now we're going to take another level further into some of the more obscure stuff, but the stuff that led to even more confusion. It was decided after, 1900 was 7-inch. 1901 they introduced the 10-inch. So in 1901, 1902, they were issuing 7-inch and 10-inch records. And then the Victor Company decided they wanted to get into celebrity recordings. Now let me explain what celebrity recordings were. This all had started with the Gramophone and Typewriter Company in Europe. In fact, even with their Russian series, they started putting a red label on it. And by 1902, they had recorded the voices of Caruso and Calvet and Plançon and a number of others. And they were quite popular. Now, of course, let me explain popular. They were selling a few. Not like the common records, okay. Now, Victor was basically, if you looked at those 10-inch records I gave you, they were a mix of band records, piccolo solos, coon songs, popular ditties. Nothing of any serious nature. And so they decided they wanted to get into celebrity records as well, and they worked out a deal with the Gramophone and Typewriter Company to get stampers from the Gramophone and Typewriter Company and press celebrity records here. Now, that's a great idea, and it worked pretty well. However, what numbers do you give them? We've already gone through the 3,000s. They were back into the 1,000s because they didn't know where to go with the 10-inch. And so they gave these 10-inch celebrity records that cost $2.50, which was a hell of a lot of money. And they gave them the number 5,000. They were the 5,000 series. This is a nice example of a, 5,000 series record. Of course, 5,000 is on the wax. And of course there is some gramophone and typewriter information as well. And these are from those stampers. Now they made pathetically few of the 5,000s. They're very, very rare. You don't see them at all. And they did that only for about 5 to 6 months, and they were gone. So they're incredibly rare, but that was the first attempt at Red Seal for Victor. Once again, the number of the record was the number of the matrix. That's the way it worked at that time. Now, something else to mention to you as well is eventually they took, in 1903, that 5,000 series and changed it around and created a Victor number that was more manageable. Because let's just go back to the whole thing. You have 7 inches that go from 1 to 1,000. You have 10 inches that were every number in the book. Then you had the 10-inch red seals that were 5,000. And of course, at this point, by the time we get into 1903, we're back into the 2,000 area for Black Label, because they had used 3,000 already in 1901. needless to say, this was utter confusion. And in 1903, they started changing everything around. Now, they took the 5000 series and switched it to something called the 91,000 series and marked imported on it to make it look more important. It still had basically the G and T numbers on it, and of course they were marked 91,000, and that was more or less their number. Now, another thing that was going on here at the same time in 1903, they introduced a matrix system to handle 7, 10, and 12 inch. Now, of course, you had 8 inch and you had a 14 inch. I'm not even going to go there. That's something you're not going to see. But when they came up with this system, the idea was they were going to start at 1, A1, B1, C1, and that way they could keep track of all the various recordings, and it would be in an order. The serial numbers, the catalog numbers, would be totally different than the matrix. Great idea. Of course, when they first implemented it, it was completely screwed up. Let me give you an example here of one of the problems. This is Victor record number 2121. Of course, that is the Monarch Black Label. George Graham, as a matter of fact. And as I mentioned to you, that Black Labels had gone by 1903 into the 2000 range because they had already done the 3000 the year before. And of course they were using 10 inch and 7 inch numbers, and as I said, it was all confused. So they finally decided to create a domestic Red Seal record, and they used the new matrix system, and that was wonderfully successful. Now, if you remember, I just showed you number 2121, which is a Black Label series. You're going to go 21, 22, 23, 24. When they issued their first Red Seals, they goofed. They got the matrix numbers right, but they got the catalog numbers wrong. This is a Black Label catalog number for the Red Seal Monarch. Talk about confusion. This didn't last too long because everything got switched around and put into the 64,000 series, and then they had the 81,000, the 85,000, and later the 87,000, 88, 89, etc. The 12-inch would be introduced at that same time they introduced that new matrix system. This is the beginnings of the 12-inch. They were called Deluxes because they were so unique. And of course, at the bottom you will see that matrix system. You see the C, whatever it is, it's C 1293, which tells us it's 1904. And of course, this is an 85,000 series. That would soon be switched. In 1905, they got rid of the Monarch and Deluxe labels and the imported labels, and they just went to a standard Victor label. Later, Victrola for Red Seal and Victor for Black Label, etc. So as you can see, it was very confusing in the early days, and I wanted to explain some of this to new collectors. You know, when you're a new collector, you're looking at a lot of this stuff and you're saying, this doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Well, in the creation of companies, in the creation of new technologies, a lot of times there's an awful lot of confusion as they go through adolescence. And in a sense, the adolescence of the Victor Company was in that 1903, 1904 period, when it was becoming a fantastic company. A company that would be far greater than any of the others around it and would soon outshine every other company. So, hopefully, this is helpful. Hopefully, this has given you some information, especially to new collectors. I like to help new collectors. I've been collecting for 45 years, so I've seen just about every type of record there is, and I like to share what I've learned with others. And I encourage, if you have questions, write me. I'll do my best to answer them for you. Or if you have a record and you want to find some information on it, maybe I can help you as well. So, once again, as I said, hope this has been helpful, and good luck collecting all the records that you do. And I hope you find great stuff.